Restless leg syndrome. Oh, okay. Okay. Oh, through the miracle of teleportation, we're back. I have Judy Vuozzo, licensed massage therapist, and Patricia Singer, okay, who is an acupuncturist. And we're continuing our conversation. And when we were off camera, we talked about things like restless leg syndrome and some of the newfangled diseases that have been, shall we say, maybe even invented to provide us with a need for other drugs that we haven't discovered yet. But tell us about, let's talk about the body healing itself. What can people do aside from visiting you in their own homes, in their own lives, to keep themselves healthy?
Breathing.
Okay.
Number one, breathing. Most people do not breathe properly. And there are a few different ways that are proper breathing, but to start people off, you would breathe in through your nose and let the breath slide all the way down to your belly, and your belly swells with the breath, and then back out through the mouth.
Now, I learned that through yoga, so that sounds very much like what yoga accomplishes.
And it is. And what I would tell people is that when you breathe, specifically when you're doing it where you're trying to calm yourself, where you're in the car and you're about to lose it, or you're in the store and you're about to lose it, is when you breathe, you're going to do nothing but think about the breath. So all your attention is focused on the breath coming in. So you're going to picture the breath coming in through your nose. You're going to follow it as it slides down your throat, past your chest, your solar plexus, and then your belly is going to swell with the breath. And then you're going to follow it all the way back out. And you do 2 or 3 of those, and it brings you back into center, back into your body. Now, when you're when you're in your head a lot, so you're constantly thinking, your mind's always going, it's always going. I was
saying, is that what we call clearing our heads, sort of?
Well, yeah. When people, you're thinking so much, all the energy is up here. And what happens is, when all the energy up here, it tends to get stuck, and what happens is the chest will get very tight. So you start to do breathing instead of with the diaphragm. You start to breathe with these little helper muscles. You have little helper muscles up here that are supposed to assist the diaphragm. What happens is they become the main breathing muscles, and they're not supposed to be. So they get very tight. So everything gets very constricted up in the chest. So the breath and the energy is not moving. When you breathe properly, you start to create, almost like with gravity, you're creating a channel for this energy to start to move. So that's probably number one, what people to take. Obviously, it would be great if you were breathing that way all the time, but to start, because breathing is automatic. We don't think about it, we just do it. So to think about something that you do automatically, it's just a process. You have to retrain yourself. So you would do it when I tell people, when you're about to lose your mind, your brains are going to squirt out your ears, you're losing it. You just stop and take 2 or 3 nice deep breaths, and just get back into your body again. So that would be number one. Something that we should all be doing is breathing properly, and certainly when we're crazy, instead of thinking, oh, I need to take something or drink something or whatever, just breathe. Just sit and just breathe. You'd be amazed how it just gets you centered right away.
Serenity now. See, you didn't watch Seinfeld. You should know about that.
Yes, well.
But those of us
the big lessons I missed by not watching Seinfeld.
those of us that watch Seinfeld know about George's father, and that George had a friend that subscribed to the idea of serenity now. But the problem was, he got to the point where it was serenity now, insanity later. and where George's father started off with serenity now, serenity now. Eventually it became serenity now! So there really wasn't much serenity involved in it.
Well, one way of getting to serenity is when you're so outside your body and you want to connect, is just to feel where you're sitting or feel where you're standing. Because the mind, energy follows wherever the mind goes. So if you're thinking sitting, just feel it. All of a sudden everything sinks. And then you can expand and listen to the sounds around you. Then you connect with your exterior world, and then you move into the breath and into the heartbeat. So it's going from outside to inside and into the container. and becoming mindful. I think as you were talking about healing, a lot of it is just mindfulness. It's learning the body's language, finding.
So you're taking maybe even 5 or 10 minutes a day, even as little as that, and just putting everything on the shelf, sitting down, getting into a comfortable position, whatever that happens to be, a calm state. Listen to yourself breathe, clear your mind.
Or listen to this. Well, I teach this a lot to ADD kids and kids in school who have trouble taking exams, or so that's, or people who have anxiety attacks. Is I just start with feel where you're sitting. It brings your energy down, and then listen to the sounds around you. So you're connecting with everything. Then feel your heartbeat. So then you have to really go in to feel that. To feel it, and if you can't feel it, then you just put your hand over your heart to feel it, and then move with the breath and just go through all those different layers. So you're coming back into your body, because anxiety is stepping out of it. So with all of these things, it's moving back in.
Now, attention deficit disorder, ADD, that's another one of those things that either we never recognized until recent years, or maybe it never existed until recent years. And everybody, I'm sure everybody in the audience probably knows somebody in their family or a close friend who's been diagnosed with ADD, attention deficit disorder. And you're saying that the simplest way to deal with that is maybe not through medication as much as through taking that time to ground yourself.
It's like there's so much attention, there's so much things out there that the kids have a real hard time. Where do I focus?
Stimulus.
And they're not allowed to stand.
External stimuli.
Constant.
And they have to sit down and be in this tiny place, and there's no movement. It's kind of going contrary to what their body. It's like what are they expressing? They're expressing, I want to expand, I want to move, and part of it is to narrow the focus and say, well, here we're paying attention to this right now, and so to do that. They're really, the kids that I've worked with, they're so far out of their body. What you're wanting to do is help them step back into their body.
So to balance that expansion, which apparently is much more part of our lives now, especially for kids, with all the with all constant television, internet, iPods, always something going in their ear. Never a lack of anything going in their ears at any moment of. Really, in fact, any day. I mean, some kids sleep with an iPod, so they're being stimulated. They're not even getting a chance to go through a dream cycle. They're being stimulated while they're sleeping. But you're saying to sort of balance that off, that external stimulation, cut out the external stimulation for a little while, and let an internal
process go.
Well, it's getting to know what it feels like. If you're always in motion, if you're always have input, you forget what it's like to be still. Maybe you never knew what it was like to be still. You have to kind of reawaken that in your body, what it's like to be in your body and to be still. It's
So it's a learned behavior rather than something you should necessarily just take for granted that you know how to do, much like breathing. I mean, breathing's supposed to be completely involuntary and organic, and yet I guess we can get away from that organic nature of breathing and have to just stop and listen to ourselves breathe and regain that focus and regain, I think we talked about balance in the other show as being very important. The balance of the body, the balance of the nature, the balance of your left leg is injured, so you overcompensate by using your right leg more. Now your right leg's injured, and now the problems just go from place to place to place to place to place inside your body.
It's all screaming. Pay attention. Stop. Listen.
And lots of times it's the end point that eventually is so painful that we'll seek people to look at traditional medicine, because even going to a Western doctor, a lot of people will just put it off and put it off and put it off until you no longer have the original problem. You have the original problem and all the things that have come from the fact you haven't dealt with the original problem.
Now, part of people putting off visits to doctors or getting any kind of wellness involves not having health care. What kind of coverage, where does healthcare recognize what you do? Do they cover what you do? Do they sometimes cover what you do? If they sometimes cover what you do, what do they generally cover? What do they generally not cover? It's a big question, but
depends on the person's individual policy. As I find
Depends on the
working at
company.
an office, what we have to do is call the insurance company first to see what they cover. I think they cover acupuncture quite well. I don't think they cover massage therapists as well.
Not as much. They did a while back, and that's kind of, in the past few years where they never used to, and then they had started to, and a lot of companies did, and it depended whether you needed a note from your doctor, a referral note. And then it's dwindled down to where a lot of companies don't cover massage at all. Or, they'll have a dollar amount of how much, maybe you have $1,500, for the year. Very similar to a chiropractic where there's a set amount, you have a set amount of visits, and there's a copay. And that's if you take insurance directly. Which I don't. I'm not very good with paperwork, so I've just kind of skipped over that.
tedious.
this is the universal complaint about everybody that administers any kind of health care to patients, the paperwork.
Yeah.
You have to have somebody in your office that's spending an entire day making phone
there's
calls
people, that's what
to
they do.
HMOs, finding out the answers to these questions, and getting an okay from the HMO to actually treat the patient. And doctors complain about this constantly. Dr. Volpentesta, who does a great show here on Comcast, talks a lot about that.
He's my neighbor.
He's pretty fabulous. As we mentioned in the previous show, Dr. Ted Blum. Ted Blum's a great old style family physician. Likewise, David Shapiro, who was in the same office as Ed Volpentesta. But with coverage, what kinds of with your patients that you have,
It's pain.
in the conversation,
Right.
Are you finding that all of them have health care coverage? Some of them have health care coverage. None of them have health care coverage. What are you finding?
They have health care coverage, but not so much that covers acupuncture is what I've been finding. And even with the acupuncture, it's really tricky. You have to... I started working at a chiropractor's office in June, and I hadn't been paid for a lot of my clients even up until October, November, because we didn't have one form that was supposed to be signed and sent in with each client. I mean, there's so many little tricks and nuances, and then also with some insurance companies, if you're out of network, it pays better than in network. You have to kind of know each individual insurance company is vastly different. And so they cover by units of treatment, and they wouldn't cover for like an emotional disorder, but they'll cover for pain. So somewhere in your diagnosis, you have to kind of put pain in there.
An emotional disorder is not pain.
Well, they wouldn't read it as pain.
So you have to be very careful
What your diagnosis codes
how you
are.
word your diagnosis.
Right.
You have to learn how to play their game.
Right.
That's just horrible. That's horrible. And we know that HMOs are always looking for ways to not provide coverage.
Delayed.
Yeah.
I think as a general rule, people who get into the healthcare field, doctors, therapists, you're doing it because that's what you want to do. It's not because you want to work with insurance companies or you want to be an accountant or you want to do all the paperwork. You're doing it I went into it because I like working with people. I like, helping people, making them feel better, helping them to, live a better life. I'm not, which is why I never got into paperwork. I'm not interested in the whole paperwork end of it and that whole, what people do when you have somebody in the office and they deal with the insurance companies. It's that language, and they just get to know this company. You got to send it in 6, 8, 10 times, and they keep bouncing it back until they pay for it. That's not what I got into, what I do for it. That's, it's about helping people. It's not about, paperwork and learning how to play someone's game.
And these layers of bureaucracy, not just on your end of the equation where you have to hire somebody to handle the paperwork, but in the HMO's case, where they're hiring people and giving them a task of basically, if you can turn somebody down, if you can find any loophole to turn them down for coverage, turn them down. If you can find a pre-existing condition, cancel the policy after you've collected however many thousands of dollars that you've collected. It's all about the profit. And don't even get me started with this because, well, I'm started, so here we are. Here we are. So everybody complains about this behemoth, this horrible animal called single-payer health care. How horrible it is. It's socialized medicine. It's, but a lot of these folks have, they're on Medicare, which is a single-payer, not-for-profit system.
And they don't cover acupuncture in Medicare.
Medicare does not cover acupuncture.
No.
There's one very large black mark or red mark, depending upon your, how you look at it, against Medicare. And it seems like if an HMO is looking to spend the least amount of money on a patient, so they'll maximize the profit, which is what they're all about, is getting profits for themselves, for their executives, for their stockholders. You would think that they would look to non-traditional forms of medicine that can accomplish greater things with lesser expense.
Where does that leave the drug companies and all their money? And that's what it comes down to. They're huge. They have lobbyists. I mean, they're huge. They're powerful, and this has been working really well for them, and they see no reason to change it. I mean, I think Western medicine does a lot of wonderful things, and I think medication can be a wonderful thing too, but it's the balance. And healthcare is really supposed to be about helping someone to get healthy and stay healthy. And it seems to me that organized healthcare has so little to do with that.
Well, before we came on, you mentioned briefly, and I've lost my train of thought, I'll come back to it. It was
restless leg syndrome. One of my all-time favorites.
That's restless arm syndrome.
That basically, from my standpoint as a healer, with all the different modalities that I know, what that really is energy. I mean, when you break us down to the basis of what we are, it's energy.
Yeah.
That's what we are. And energy wants to move. Energy always wants to move. It wants to be moving. When your body gets very tight, when the muscles get very tight, and the joints start to get locked up, energy cannot move the way it wants to. But it's still there. It needs to move, and it wants to move. It just can't move.
So it's reaching a point and stopping.
And it's stuck. And what happens is it reaches a point and it can't move anymore, and the legs or the arms or whatever will bounce because the energy wants to move and it can't. So restless leg syndrome, what it really is the energy is not moving the way it should. Working with someone to unblock in the body where the energy is stuck, the energy moves. I mean, I have...
So this is why people that nowadays, that in decades and centuries past, had more active lifestyles in their employment. Now a lot of us are in situations where we're very sedentary in our jobs, in the same position, sitting in the same chair, with the same muscles, the same arteries, the same everything, pushing against the same chair the same way for 8 hours or however many hours we go in between moving. This is why we now have what we call restless leg syndrome.
Or carpal tunnel.
Or carpal tunnel syndrome.
It's doing repetitive, it's patterns.
And it's
also
also
the same thing.
For where someone is going in their life. I mean, it's the physical thing, yes, I'm sitting, but it's also where am I going in my life? Am I in a job I like? Am I in relationships that I like? It's very connected with that too, because that's also energy. And energy always wants to move. So a relationship moving and interacting the way it needs to, or the way that's in balance, as opposed to a relationship that's kind of going in circles or not going anywhere. So it's again, you're getting into those different layers, the physical, the emotional, the spiritual, the mental levels. It affects all of it. And something as simple as just walking, grounding, again, the feet, will help the energy move. You're think of the earth as this huge magnet, and as you walk, it just starts to pull the energy down, pulls the energy down.
It gets
So
that
it's,
circulation.
I mean, I don't know what
circulation going.
What medication they do for the restless leg syndrome. I can't imagine what it is they're giving them, but it's the first time I heard it, and I was like, no, your energy's not moving. We just need to open this up. You need to, you know, breathe into it, because when it gets very tight, you feel it, and you feel it jam. The impulse is to kind of hold your breath and tighten, which is the opposite of what the body needs. You need to kind of calm your mind, breathe into it, and it does take a good amount of control when it's gotten that jam to just relax so that it can move. Because the impulse is you feel it and you want to tighten, but if you can breathe into it, you know, or even just like rocking the legs to get the, you know, to get the movement, even not just laying still, just rocking it so the energy can start to move. But yeah.
Well, not to digress back to Seinfeld, but just for a second, Kramer called it the Jimmy leg. But essentially that's what it was. His leg had an involuntary twitch. And I'm sure they were poking fun at all these things. But you talked about evolution. You talked about us evolving as people, our relationships evolving, always moving forward. And that as opposed to getting into a more stagnant lifestyle. And you mentioned that was sort of like, you alluded to that being a problem, doing things contrary to what's natural and normal.
Well, what makes you happy? I mean, people stay in relationships all the time, whether it be a work relationship, a love relationship, or a friendship, where it's not working, it's not making you happy. I mean, that's really what everything you do should be bringing you a certain amount of pleasure. Not all the time. I mean, there's always ups and downs, but there should be, you know, it should be moving. The soul's evolution. You know, that's what the soul wants to do.
So the options in that case are to be frank with your friend or your partner or whomever, and talk through it. Find a resolution. Find a way to evolve forward.
Is getting grounded and breathing, because usually, if you're in a relationship and it's not working, and whether that be a relationship with your body, a relationship with someone else, a relationship at work, there's a lot of frustration that builds up. So when you finally decide you're going to say something, it may not be the best time to speak, because all that frustration, when finally you give it a vent to come out, it's all going to come out, and then you're doing collateral damage cleanup for all the things you've said.
I hear vent, and I'm thinking hyperventilate. you get all wound up,
steamed,
and you can't express yourself in a calm fashion.
It just all pours out everything. Things that,
and you say things that maybe you wish you hadn't said afterwards, or you say them the wrong way, or you don't give the other person a chance to respond to what you're saying and give them a chance to...
Because you're not listening, you're not having a conversation, you're just letting it rip.
One-way communication
You're just,
two-way.
you know, you're just like, blah. It's all coming out.
Here you go.
So I think the first thing
let me dump on you and you deal with it.
Coming back to the feet, to getting grounded and being in your body. I mean, and breathing. Those are the keys to really getting everything to work the way it should. And by that I mean that you're constantly moving and progressing, and you're evolving as a person. You're evolving as a soul. It always to me comes back to the feet and to breathing, being in your body, being, you know, in that still place. So yeah, because usually if you're, you know, when you finally, and I've had the experience where you finally open your mouth, it's, you know, and then you've got like wounded, bleeding people all around you that you really love, that now you have to go around like patching it up and, you know, saying I'm sorry, and you've kind of lost the whole thing of what you were trying to say, is that this particular thing's not working, you know.
And it's hard to take things back once you've said them.
No, it's also because we don't say it as we go along. It's like we don't say the things that are in between all the time. We just hold it in until it gets to be too big.
What other kinds of things can people do in their daily lives besides taking that time and finding a breathing and a meditation and a clearing of the head? What other kinds of things can people do to keep themselves healthy in between visits to you or traditional medicine? What else can they do?
Movement, or if you're doing, I'm just thinking of the carpal tunnel, if you're always doing this action, to do an opposite action. So if you're sitting at the computer with a mouse all the time, then to roll back the shoulders, or to shrug them, to stand up and move around, so that you're doing an opposite motion. So if you're always bending forward, to bend backwards, to twist and turn and stretch. yoga. Simple stretching is really great.
That's one of the great laws of science, is that every action has an equal and opposite reaction.
Right. So if you're doing the opposite,
and applying it to keeping yourself healthy, doing the opposite of what you do for however many hours a day. Now, if I'm working at a keyboard 6 hours a day or 4 hours a day or whatever,
shake out your hands.
Take your hands and shake them.
Or just give a little massage.
And just
and really stretching as much as you can.
Okay.
Even, pulling on your fingers gently, just to,
Although
just
Mom always said, don't do that because your knuckles get gigantic.
No, that was cracking.
Oh, okay.
It was cracking because I grew up with that. If you crack, you have big knuckles.
That sound is just the synovial fluid cracking.
Yeah.
Like there's the joints, and then as you're pulling it, there's gases in between each of the joints. So what you're actually just hearing is the gases snapping.
Actually, something very good that people can do, and you would do this either in front of a mirror or with a partner. And you would stand there and you take one arm and you just start to shake it out. Just shake it out and breathe. Just shake it out. And you do this for maybe a count of 15, 20, you're just shaking it and breathing. And then you stand there and you look in the mirror, or you have the person you're working with look at you, and that arm will be anywhere from 1 to 3 inches longer than the other one. From the simple action of just shaking out the muscles, and that's how tight we
actually will let your arm extend back out inches?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my God.
Noticeably. And just doing that, and you look in the mirror, if you're alone, so that you can actually see. And you can look, and you'll say, okay, and then you shake out the other arm. And this will also tell you which side is tighter than the other.
And the other thing, when you're really wound up, is you can't tell someone to relax because they think that they are relaxed, but when you're doing a rotation or something, it's like clunk. So what you do is you hold and tighten everything up as much as you possibly can, tighten until you can't hold it anymore, then exhale, and then you'll feel that relaxed. Even trying to get to sleep at night, if you can't sleep, just tighten up the whole body, scrunch it, then let go, and then that'll help.
So the way to loosen yourself up is by tightening
yourself. Tightening, and then, because then you see the difference between what's tight and what's loose.
You see a very specific reaction. You can gauge the reaction. Okay, we're down to the end of our show, a second one, so we're going to have to do a third one, that means. Not tonight, but another night we'll do a third one. But this has been Progressive Soup. My name is David Stevenson. We have Patricia Singer, Judy Vuozzo, talking about keeping ourselves healthy. Thank you very much. Enjoy your evening.